Hi, this is voiceover artist and coach Rodney Salisbury, and you're listening to the Voiceover Marketing Podcast with John Melly.
This is the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, episode number 59.
The moment you actually saw what your favorite radio DJ looked like. Heart-wrenching moments of truth.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. My name is John Melly, and this is the podcast dedicated to teaching in-depth and advanced marketing strategies for people in the voiceover and audio production professions. My goal is to help you make more money by showing you ways to leverage your time, charge more for your talents, and allow you to spend more time doing the things you want to do in your life. The Voiceover Marketing Podcast is sponsored by the book Voice Over Legal by Rob Siglampaglia. You don't think you need this book? Here's a question for you. Have you ever been asked to do a celebrity impression for a commercial? If you have, you might want to think twice, unless you live in a particular state. You can find out why impersonations can be a problem and why you could get sued if you do one, and which state is exempt from all of that on page 28 of the VoiceOver Legal book. Now, we've arranged a discount for you to save up to $5. That's up to 20% off the list price of the book, and you can support the podcast at the same time. If you're a voice artist and you're treating your business as a business, you need this book. Just go to voiceoverlegal.com. When you go to voiceoverlegal.com, enter the promo code VMP at checkout to save $5 off the cost of the book. That's promo code V as in voice, M as in marketing, and P as in podcast at checkout to save $5 off the cost of the book, and you'll support the podcast at the same time. Thanks. And now back to the show. Hey there, it's John. How are you? Thanks for spending some time with me today. I do appreciate it. I decided to kick my sneakers off in the studio today and sit with my socks on, and I got to tell you, it feels good. It's very freeing. Do you wear shoes all day, or do you like to go barefoot as much as possible? I used to wear shoes all day long and really tie them up tight until my trainer told me, you know what, you really need to buy bigger shoes, and if you can, don't wear shoes when you don't have to. And that's been a game changer, huh? What's that got to do with anything? I don't know. But here in the Boston area, it's a balmy 53 degrees. And do you know what happens when it's 53 degrees out? Here's a little nugatory nugget for the Treasure Trove of Trivia. 53 degrees Fahrenheit is the magic temperature for bees, honeybees specifically, to be able to fly. So my honeybees, did you know that I have a honeybee hive in my backyard? I do. And I love my honeybees. And so they're out and about flying and taking little bathroom flights so that they don't poop in the hive. And it's really interesting because my car gets covered with these little orange dots. It's bee poop. They're very clean insects. They don't like to do that in the hive. And so it's actually the warmer temperature today is a good thing for them because they can take care of business outside the hive, tidy up the hive, bring out their dead, ding, and other things. But what's really exciting is that they're still alive. In the last 3 years that I've had honeybees, I've had to put a new colony in because they've died. But this year, I think they're going to make it through the winter, which is very, very exciting. And a little public service announcement for the health and safety of the honeybees out there. With spring arriving and the summer season, if you're a gardener, please refrain from using pesticides and insecticides around plants. I know weeds are a nuisance and it's easy and tempting to just want to spray something at them and have them wither up and die. But that's the stuff that's killing the bees and other pollinators, and we need them for our food. I know this is the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, but you know, it's all about health and taking care of our instrument, our voice, our bodies. We are voiceover athletes, and we have to take care of ourselves to maximize our performance. And part of taking care of ourselves is not spraying chemicals all over everything that kills the bugs that help create the healthy foods for us. So anyway, if you haven't bought pesticides this year, think twice before using them, okay? That's all I'll say. That would be great. And my honeybees and bees around America and the world will thank you. And gardens will thank you. And your tummy will thank you. All right, time to move on. Got a lot of great comments from folks who have signed up for the Voiceover Marketing Podcast group on Facebook. As I'm looking at my screen right now, as I'm recording this intro, we have 1,590 members. Right on that button. And we've got a lot of people asking some questions. I'm going to get to your questions next week. We've got a lot of great questions that we're going to take a crack at. But I have a great interview with Karen Tiber-Leland because one of the questions we've received in the Facebook group is, what's the difference between branding, marketing, and networking? And Karen literally wrote the book on that. And so we're going to have a conversation with her. And just a quick stat update on the number of downloads. We have, as of this recording, this is exciting, 93,980 downloads of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, various odd and sundry episodes. And I want to thank you for that. Thanks for listening. We're going to hit 100,000 downloads soon. That is so cool. I know that, for some people, they get that per episode. But for this narrow niche of voiceover marketing to have close to 100,000 downloads, that's incredibly gratifying. Thank you very much for sharing the podcast. If you know someone in voiceover profession, audio production, if you know somebody who produces podcasts, share this podcast with them. And if you give a review, that's what helps keep it at the top of the list in iTunes. It seems since they've changed their algorithms, it's the reviews that help keep it up top. So anyway, always welcome an honest and fair review. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. I know that's an investment if you choose to do that. Enough of the housekeeping. Let's get right to the interview. Well, welcome back. As I mentioned in the first part of the program, my guest today is Karen Tiber-Leland, and she's the president of Sterling Marketing Group, which is a branding and marketing strategy firm. She helps business leaders develop stronger personal, business, and team brands. And some of her clients include Cisco, American Express, Marriott Hotels, Apple Computer, and others. And she's the best-selling author of 9 business books, including The Brand Mapping Strategy, Design, Build, and Accelerate Your Brand. And that's one of the reasons why we have her on the program today. Karen has written for Entrepreneur, Self, the LA Times, and other publications. She's spoken for Harvard, TEDx Yale, the Direct Marketing Association, and others. And Karen, it'd probably be easier to list the networks you haven't been on than to list all of the networks that you have been featured on, such as the Today Show, CNN, Oprah, CNBC, Fox Business News, etc. But let's dive in. How are you today?
I'm good. And also I've been very fortunate in my career. I mean, I feel very blessed to have been covered by all those wonderful media outlets and also to have connected with the people I've had. So I'm very lucky.
Well, that's great. That's nice to hear. I am too. Let's just frame what we're going to talk about today, because we get a lot of questions from listeners of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast about, hey, John, what's the difference between branding and marketing and networking? And you've literally written the book, The Brand Mapping Strategy. And so I thought, when your assistant Bethany reached out to us, I thought, you know what? Let's get the expert on. Let's talk about that. But before we define all those things, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to do what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So, I started out as well, first of all, this will make you laugh. I don't think you know this about me. I was a musical theater major in college and an art minor.
Cool.
And one day I was in an audition and I thought, this is a crazy way to try to make a living. And I just decided that it was probably not the best path for me. Although I loved it and it was fun and I still do it for fun, I pretty much decided that being an actor or an artist was not going to be the best path for me in terms of a living. And so I went back to school for business development and I became really a management consultant. I ran a management consultant firm for many, many years all over the world, a boutique consulting firm specializing in customer engagement and employee engagement and leadership development and et cetera, et cetera. And after about 20 years of doing that, I was writing books. I was writing business books, and I was the one in our company who had been given the responsibility of making sure that the books were the marketing. I was in charge of the marketing and the branding for our company. Mm-hmm. And I started to like that field so much that after about 20 years as a management consultant, I thought, you know what, I'm really much more interested in the branding and marketing side of business. And so I started this company, Sterling Marketing Group, to really work on personal and CEO and team and business branding and marketing. So that was how I ended up getting here. But the funny part is, as you know, being somebody who specializes in what you specialize in, I use my acting training every day. Mm-hmm. So whenever I have to do a webinar or an interview, the fact that I know how to use my voice is really incredible. So it's been a great gift that stayed with me my whole career.
Yeah, I completely agree. You talk about how you had a more of a fine arts background. I was a political science major in college, and actually
there you go.
I was a lobbyist for the real estate industry for years. And my mom has a saying. She says, "No experience is ever wasted." And I know I've said that before in the podcast, but all of the things that we do in our lives contribute to where we are now. So I totally get that.
Yeah, so that's how I got here.
That's cool. So you, having auditioned, you kind of understand what a lot of our listeners go through in terms of auditioning quite a bit. And just before we started our conversation, we were talking about how a lot of voice talent spend a lot of time auditioning and wondering how they can get someone to hire them. And one of the things we talked about this podcast is create your own products and services using your talents that you can sell and create assets for your business. I guess that dovetails nicely into what we want to talk about today is how can we brand ourselves and market ourselves so that we can promote those products and services that we create, but also our services to clients who want to hire us to voice their products and services as well.
Well, I think one of the things you have to start with is understanding that branding and marketing today, they're different, but they also are very integrated because of the world we live in. So the way I would define branding is really how you position yourself in the market. In other words, who are you? How do you describe yourself? What is that's unique that you bring to the market? What's your position in the market? What's your contribution? Marketing is getting that message out there. And so the branding is the clarity of the messaging, and then the marketing is actually the actions you take to get the marketing, to get the message out there, essentially get clients. But they do go hand in hand today. There's not as much of a separation and a distinction between them as there used to be, just because of, the internet and social media.
Yeah. How do you think that has changed that evolution?
Well, I think one way it's changed that evolution is that, it used to be sort of a one and done phenomenon. There's others. It was like the biggest stick in the market. So, for example, if you got on Oprah, people would think, okay, if I can just get on Oprah with my book, then that's it. My career is made. And so it used to be like one big hit is what you needed. And today it's not really one big hit. It's thousands of small little hits that are the right ones. So branding and marketing's become much more of a marathon than a sprint with social media and the internet.
What's occurring to me as you're telling me this information is that this is more of a niche type culture than it used to be. When you mentioned about you got on Oprah with your book and you were done, the thing that came to my mind was that if you were a comic back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, if you got on Johnny Carson, you were done.
Exactly.
You were all set.
And today you can achieve that by having a hit on YouTube.
Right. So the platform's changed. But have you read the book, The Long Tail? I'm sure you have.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about, if I'm getting your message correctly, is that the branding is what do you bring to the marketplace? So are you a voice talent that specializes in a specific industry? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, but in my model, and again, my model's just my model, it's a great model and it works, doesn't mean it's the only one.
Sure.
But, in my model, the brand mapping strategy, the brand mapping process and the brand mapping strategy, which is what I wrote the book on, I really talk about it as that there's 7 key lenses you need to be focusing on to define your brand. And if you're and only one of those is what people typically call the elevator pitch. I call it the anchor statement. But if you're only doing the elevator pitch, you don't really have a well thought out brand. But there's 7 different lenses you have to be looking at your brand through in order to be really have it be effective.
Okay. Can you share a few of those lenses?
Sure.
That'd be great.
So one is the anchor statement, which is the go-to description of who you are. That is the one that's sometimes called the elevator pitch.
Okay.
But then there's also the unique branding proposition, which is what is it about what you do or how you do it that makes you unique, distinct, special? What sets you apart? There's what I call the brand tone and temperament. You know, what's the consistent mood or tenor or quality or character or manner that you bring to all your interactions? You know, what's your brand energy? What can you be counted on to contribute in any circumstance at any time? What's your signature story? You know, why do you do what you do? What's the essential story that brought you to that place? What's what I call your signature service, which is your core competencies and your offers? And then, you know, what are your brand enhancers and reducers? What are your current strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats? And while those sound very sort of simple and obvious, it takes me usually an entire day of hard work, like sweat work, with an individual or with a business to get the answers to those 7 lenses.
I can imagine that it would, because there's probably a lot of introspection and having to get the organization or the individual to be candid enough with themselves to admit what a lot of those are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably half your day.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's funny. So in light of all those lenses that you shared with us, you know, go back to the earlier part of our conversation where we were talking about auditioning. Is there something that we can do with these lenses that will improve or positively affect the way we go about auditioning?
It's funny because, you know, we were talking about auditioning, and I, even though it's not what I do for a living, I still audition for theater as well as TV and film. So the funny thing is people put so much emphasis on what happens in the audition room. And does that matter? Of course it does. But, you know, what happens before and after the audition room makes a difference as well. So think about it. If you're trying to build your brand and you've got an audition with somebody and you do a great audition, but then you can send them a little note card afterwards or an email afterwards or send them a little, you know, business card afterwards. And on it, you've got a link to a blog that you write about voiceover, or you've got a blog that you write about something, or you've got, you know, a podcast that you're doing, or you've got something else that shows who you are and what you think and what your brand is, that all shores up and reinforces the brand. So I think in some ways people put way too much emphasis on what happens in the audition room. Again, I'm not saying that doesn't matter. It does.
Sure.
But when you're clear about that, who you are in that brand, you tend to walk into the audition room with a clearer presentation of who you are. That's one thing. But then there's lots of things you can do on either side of the audition that can help make the case. You know, you don't ever know where someone's going to find you. And so part of it is people assume that all of the action happens just through the audition. But I know, and I'm certain that you know, people that have been hired lots of times because someone found them somewhere else, not just in the audition room.
Oh, sure. That's happened to me.
It's happened to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's that. I would say more often than not for in my particular case, but that makes a lot of sense. Now, I have a question for you. I can hear the actors out there saying, "Well, yes, but I'm supposed to be something that the producer wants me to be, and if I'm positioning myself in one way." And it's not close to what they want it to be, is that going to limit my abilities to be able to audition?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was just recently taking an on-camera auditioning class, and the teacher asked us to come dressed for a commercial audition in, you know, how we would, in a certain way.
Okay.
And I came in, and he said to me, "You look very nice, but you can't sell that." And I started laughing, and I thought, oh my God, he's totally right. He goes, this is just my type. Everyone has their type,
sure,
right? He says, you're very sophisticated and you're dressed a little bit more like funky and fun. And while you could get away with that on a date, you're not going to be able to sell that to a director. And I went, oh my God, he's totally right. So, you know, part of it is that you really have to be what you are. You have to be clear what you are. You have to be clear what your brand is, because that's what you can sell. And even if you think you're selling something else, you're not. You're not fooling them, because energetically, you know, you have a certain way that you are. We all do. So going in there, really being 100% clear on what you are and selling that, I think is people's best chance for getting hired. And then once you're in and once you're doing stuff, if you have other capacities, if you can stretch, you get the chance then to show other parts of yourself. But, you know, even for me, being a branding strategist, that had to be pointed out to me. And part of the reason why is it's very hard to see through the inside of our own eyelids.
Right. You're too close.
It's really tough. So I think that thing about what you can sell is really what you are. And so sticking to that is a profoundly powerful way to go into an audition.
Don't try and be something you're not.
No, just because you think that's what they want, because you won't be able to pull it off anyway.
Right. The thing that pops into my head as you're talking is, and I know I've been using that phrase a lot, but a lot of what you're saying is really making me think quite a bit. I imagine for a lot of clients that you work with, that at the end of this process, there must be a lot of relief on the part of the client. It's like, oh, you mean I can just be myself?
Well, there is a lot of relief, because I think a lot of times when people, CEOs or executives or individuals come to me, the concern is I don't want to pretend I'm something I'm not. What I always say is, look, what I mean by branding, your self-personal branding, is never about lying, faking, exaggerating, or pretending to be something you're not. It's really about actually getting to the true heart and essence of what your contribution is, and then being very clear about how you represent that. So I think people not only feel relieved, they often feel empowered to really go out and be their greatest contribution. Because your contribution is not mine.
Right.
They're equally important, but your contribution is not mine.
And how much of this then translates into the ideal audience finding you?
For the ideal audience to find you, one, you have to be clear on who you are and expressing it that way, but you also have to be out there. This is where the marketing part comes in. You have to be doing things so that you can be seen by people. And whatever that is for an individual, that might be different. There's over 40 different tactics you can use to brand and market yourself or your business, your personal or your business brand. You're not going to do all 40. You're going to pick the 2 or 3 or 4 that are strategically the most useful for you. Yeah. So for some people, that may be going and doing stage readings, because even though they're not voiceovers, they get seen by people that are directing or producing those things. For some people, that may mean doing a podcast and they get heard that way. For other people, that may mean writing a blog post about the industry and they get seen that way. So part of it is just you have to figure out of those 40 tactics which ones are the right ones for you.
Sure, that makes sense. First have to find out what the 40 tactics are, and then you can pick which ones work best for you.
Well, in the 40 tactics, they're generally, like I know in the book, I kind of list what the different tactics are. There are sort of general categories of tactics: PR, podcasting, webcasting, blog writing, traditional PR and media, advertising. And, there are these sort of general categories, but part of it is figuring out your individual branding and marketing plan for your business. And if your plan is only show up and audition, that's not a branding and marketing plan.
Very candid and frank and good advice. I would agree. Karen, you've given me a lot to chew on here, and I'm sure the folks listening to the podcast are thinking, wow, there's a lot of stuff here to look into and to work on. If people want to learn more, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, and what other resources can you direct people to?
Well, certainly people can go to my website at www.karenleland.com. They can get the book, The Brand Mapping Strategy, Design, Build, and Accelerate Your Brand, on Amazon. And then, I often have individuals who want to work with me, but they're not looking to do what a company is doing, which is spend a year having me manage their brand. So I do something called a Rent My Brain session, and it's a lightning strike 1-hour session that I do, consulting session I do over the phone with individuals to really help them answer some key questions about their brand or their strategy. So that's always possible and available as well.
Oh, that sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's an easy way for people to do some work with me that doesn't require a lot of money or time.
Cool. And you can find out about that on your website, KarenLeland.com?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to put links in the show notes for this episode to your website and your book and all those other great opportunities. Anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
The one thing I just want to say is remember that we still live in a world where, despite all the digital and the online, that there's no substitute for face-to-face. So I still encourage people to get out there and network with people face-to-face. I think, as one of my clients says, deals happen over meals. I still think taking people to lunch, meeting with people, going to conferences, seeing people, I think all of that makes a huge difference.
I completely agree. One of the things that I talk about on the podcast is showing up where no one else is, because if people spend a lot of time on the what we call the pay-to-play sites, they're basically working in a commodity marketplace where there are thousands of people with voice talents that you're competing with. But if you're somewhere where you're the only one. You're the only game in town. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow that.
Okay. Very good. Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your information with us. And we'll be sure to check out that book.
Thank you, John. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching with me and mastermind group opportunities where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice with the world.